Hey, thanks for being here. And let's just start off with what's going on. Everyone pretty much knows that the World Health Organization declared a global pandemic. We see the entire world, I think it's like 140 countries where they're experiencing the same problem. And it seems like the whole entire world is shut down. And the global economy is affected. The U.S. economy is affected. We've been watching the market go down. What is your take on the global economy, the U.S. economy? Do you think that we're headed into a recession at this point? What do you think is happening?
Yeah, recession's a nice word. No, we're headed into a depression, and the reason being, even before the coronavirus started to shut commerce down, business was already contracting, trade was contracting, and remember, we live now in a world that's more highly indebted, highly levered on any basis you want to look at, whether it be total or debt to GDP or debt to cash flow, however you want to look at the debt. It's never been at these levels before. And then comes along the coronavirus and everything gets shut down. So it's a credit event. It's a debt event where you've basically rendered all of the credit worthless because the cash flow stops. Now, the response has been basically the Fed says that they will print anything and everything to purchase anything and everything they need to purchase to keep the system up. You're talking about the Treasury coming with with trillions of dollars of fiscal stimulus, and they're going to mail people checks in the mail. I mean, where does all this money come from? It's conjured up from nothing. And I've said many times before, if you can create something for nothing, it's worth nothing. So this is going to lead to, this will lead to a depression. It's going to lead to a hyperinflationary depression. I did an interview with Jim, maybe 6 or 8 months ago, and he said the whole world is Venezuela, and that's what you're going to see is the whole world is Venezuela.
So what you're saying is that the Fed opened the floodgates to all this, and Trump has been pushing them to open the floodgates to push stimulus, bring down the rates. Do you think this has been a planned event where they're pushing the central bank establishment into like overdrive?
I'd rather not go there other than to say there are no coincidences.
Okay. So since we're watching this, will this whole thing, and you said this is going to be a hyperinflation depression, how will that affect the economy then?
It's going to completely wipe out savings. It'll completely wipe out pensions, savings accounts, etc., because you're looking at currencies that are going to collapse. Again, you can use Venezuela as a roadmap. What happens is once hyperinflation sets in, and when it first sets in, people breathe a sigh of relief and think, whew, it's over. Like today with the market up 1,500 points or whatever. People are breathing a sigh of relief. And you very well may see stocks do nothing but go up from here. But they're going to go up much slower than the currency goes down. The other thing is you get supply problems. You get to the point where goods don't make it to market. Hyperinflation is a disaster. It's a societal disaster. And I think when all is said and done, we very well may approach Mad Max and society breaking down.
Does the hyperinflation wipe out debt? I mean, because the world is flooded with just a huge amount of debt.
Well, yes and no. If you go back to Weimar Germany, what they actually did was they reset the real estate notes. They reset that to the price of gold prior to the hyperinflation. So that was not a jubilee. Where this goes, whether we go to jubilee, somebody has to lose. Either the owners of the debt lose or the debtors lose. One or the other. Someone has to lose. And when I say the debtors have to lose, if they're forced into bankruptcy, forced to lose the asset, then they lose. If there's actually a jubilee, then the creditors who provided the capital to begin with, they lose. But someone loses.
Now, we've been seeing during this whole entire period, we've been seeing gold where it has dropped dramatically and it shot up dramatically. Do you think gold is going to continually move higher and higher at this point?
Gold and silver are money.
Right.
And the paper COMEX, which people quote. I mean, I had trolls emailing me last week saying, oh, look at gold and silver, they're down, blah, blah, blah. Well, COMEX is irrelevant at this point. We got down as low as, I guess, call it $12 on silver on COMEX. And you could look, just scour the internet. You could look from dealer to dealer to dealer. Most all products were gone. If you could find Eagles or Maples, they were $24, $25, $26 a piece. If you could find junk silver, that was $22 an ounce. Almost basically 100% premium over spot. If you look at gold, the premiums are a little bit lower. The premiums on gold at this point, you're looking at about $250 to $300. If you can find Eagles, the U.S. Mint has shut down. They're not shipping gold or silver Eagles. The Royal Canadian Mint shut down, I think, Friday. And then yesterday we heard of 3 major Swiss refineries shut down. The point being, a week ago, or a week and a half ago, Friday, that weekend, Friday to Monday, supply from precious metals dealers was wiped off the shelves. Literally cleaned off the shelves in 2 days.
So what does that, I mean, at this point you're saying that gold, whoever has gold, the dealers and things, they're just going to run dry.
Well, they're pretty much run dry already. What I'm trying to tell you is that the COMEX price that you see on your computer is complete horseshit. It's irrelevant.
So when we look at, like, say, Market Watch or any of these places, and it shows, like, you know, today gold is up to 1,600, that's that price is irrelevant.
Good luck trying to find an Eagle under 1850, 1900. Good luck trying to find a run-of-the-mill numismatic, a BU, Liberty, or St. Gaudens. Good luck finding those under $2,000. You might be able to find them for 1950.
So do you think when you're saying that we're heading into a hyperflation depression, is this the point where gold starts to move up dramatically? Like you just can't find it, and if you wanted to purchase gold, if it was out there, you just couldn't get it at this point.
People not selling their metal for anything paper. We're at the cusp of your gold and your silver is worth whatever you can buy real goods with it, but people are not going to sell it for dollars. If they do, they're foolish. That's what's going to make price. The cash market is what's going to make price. In my opinion, I think what you're going to see, I think we're headed toward markets closing. And I think COMEX will close, and I don't think COMEX will reopen. Not COMEX altogether, but I don't think COMEX gold or silver will reopen. And I think that is the way that they will cover the shorts. It'll be a cash settlement, never to reopen.
So is this a reset of the system? Because when this started, a lot of countries, especially Europe and the United States, and they're looking at the supply chains, and this was a globalist system, it was coming all out of China, and they're saying, you know something, maybe having everything in China, all our supply chains in China is not a good idea. Europe was saying that. The U.S. was saying that. Is this the big reset? Is this the big change?
This is what we think is reset number 1. This will be a man-made reset. And
you've talked about this on when we spoke to each other before.
Yeah, it's the reset, the man-made reset has already started. We're in the middle of it. Markets will close, and then you will see the result of the reset. We think that might hold a month, 6 months. We don't think more than a year's time. And then the Mother Nature's reset will finally take place.
So I think when we spoke before, you said the first reset, it's going to look like things are getting better, right, and the market, might go up. It will look like things are evening out. And you're saying that we're going to see that now. I mean, how long is that going to last to the end of the year? And then we're going to see.
Hey, I mean, it might only last a month or 2 months, but it will not be permanent because this first reset, I don't believe, is going to address the debt. All of the debt that's outstanding. I mean, for instance, right now, what do they have? There's a bill in Congress where they're talking about putting a moratorium on interest for 180 or 360 days. Well, that's wonderful if you owe money, but if you're owed money, that's not too wonderful. So the final reset has to address, Mother Nature's reset will address the debt.
So with this first reset, do you think everything is being put into place? Because we're seeing, student debt. They're talking about the student loans. They're talking about a proposed tax cut a payroll tax cut. They're talking about many things. They're talking about actually the stimulus bill where they're going to send people funds, where they're having a lot of this currency being printed, quite a lot of it, trillions of dollars. Is this the first part of it to drive the system into the ground and maybe try to protect the people in some way as we go through this?
Dave, seriously,
Mm-hmm.
what has happened is the economy's dead. They put the bottom, 20, 25% of wage earners out of business. You're talking about bartenders, waitresses. You're talking about the gig economy is dead, and they had no savings at all. So what they're doing is they're herding the sheep into the corral and saying, we will save you. We will feed you. We'll do everything for you.
I agree with you, but if they get a check of $2,000, $3,000, or $4,000, will this hold them over until they can go back to work?
Until what?
Until they can go back to work.
Dave, the economy is not going to come back up like that. The debt is already impaired. The debt, you're talking about something that was walking a tightrope for many years to make the debt service. Remember, they continually lowered interest rates year after year after year. And they did that because the debt, to be serviced, they had to have lower and lower rates. So they got to zero. Then what do? What they did here is they're kicking the table over.
So with this first reset, we will see things, like you said, like maybe calm down a little bit. And then the second reset, what happens in the second reset?
Well, the second reset is Mother Nature's reset. All assets will become properly priced via real cash markets as opposed to derivatives. Debt is going to be wiped out one way or the other, whether it be liquidated or what have you, but the owners of debt are going to lose assets. I mean, it's the second reset is we go toward a real cash-based economy. And we believe that you will have in that reset, you will have gold backed, not convertible, because if you make a currency convertible, it converts, but gold backed currencies.
So with the gold backed currency, you're saying that's going to build confidence in the system.
Exactly.
Now, during this second reset, is the central bank completely exposed? Because they don't have an event. They don't have a war. They don't have an event. They don't have anything to cover up.
Central bank? Do you need a central bank at that point?
No, but the central banks, they never want to give up power.
Right, but that's the point. The second reset, the central banks more than likely will not exist. You'll have treasuries that show we have X amount of gold, and it's going to have to be shown. I mean, it won't, the U.S. running around saying we have 8,300 tons of gold, and look at our audit from 1956. That's not going to cut it. Countries are going to have to actually verify how much gold they have.
So at that point, the
currencies can be issued from treasuries directly without a central bank.
So the U.S. at that point is going to have to show that we actually have the gold.
I would think so.
And if we do have, let's say we have the 8,300 tons of gold.
If you and I did business together,
mm-hmm.
you would want to see some verification that I could perform, right?
Correct.
And it's the same thing. It's the same way with trade partners. They want, they're not going to take our word for it that we have 8,300 tons of gold. Here's some dollars. They want to make sure that the gold is there, and those are actually gold-backed dollars or Ameros or whatever the current, the new name becomes.
So if the U.S. has the gold, does that pretty much make it so the central bank they're put out of business?
I would think so.
Do you think?
And if they have the gold or if they don't have the gold, I think central banks are going to be wiped out in this episode.
And if the central banks are wiped out, what is it? Each country, they create their own currency?
Right. You're talking about the treasuries.
The treasuries of each country, yes.
Exactly. And that way the country's not paying interest to their central bank.
So what about like the IMF, the World Bank, the Bank of International Settlement, gone?
Do they have gold? IMF says they have 3,000 tons of gold. So theoretically, that's a solvent entity. Does the World Bank have gold? Does BIS? Yeah, BIS either has or has control of gold. But the point being, the banking system is going to look entirely different because nations aren't going to be required to borrow from their central bank and pay interest on it.
So at that point, with the second reset, the Federal Reserve note that we have today, that's going to be completely changed. We're going to be going on to a different currency system.
Correct.
And
yeah, actually, if you noticed in this potential fiscal stimulus bill, they tried to put a digital currency clause in there. Now, whether it makes it through or not, I don't know, but that is where we're headed. We are headed toward a digital currencies.
And who controls this digital currency?
Well, you're going to see each nation do a digital currency.
But
Dave, it's pretty clear with quote, the virus, money's dirty. It's got to become electronic. And what I'm telling you is, in reality, money is gold and everything else is a derivative of gold and silver.
But this is not going to be a central bank digital currency because central banks won't exist. So this is going to be a free, open.
It may be on this first reset. That's where we're headed. We're headed to a digital currency administered by central banks. When all is said and done with the second reset, do sovereign treasuries administer a digital currency? I don't know whether sovereign treasuries will or not, but the day of the central bank in my opinion, is over because their system is blowing up. They created is blowing up because there's too much debt. It can't be serviced. There's more debt outstanding than can ever be repaid because the interest doesn't exist to pay that debt.
So what happens on the other side of the second reset? What type of economy world are we looking at once the central bank is done? Once we get through the reset, what type of world are we going to experience?
I would guess that you're going to experience a world where things aren't done on credit. I'm not saying there won't be any credit, but go back to the Great Depression. You had a lot of credit there was some credit, a good amount in real estate, but there was huge margin credit in the stock market. That asset bubble blew up, and for 25, 30 years, people didn't want to use credit. People were afraid to use credit. And actually, at some, during parts of from 1930 to 1937, obtaining credit was very difficult. And that's what the new world is going to look like, is a world where A, credit is difficult to get, and B, people who got wiped out the first time, if they're still alive, are not going to want to take on debt again. Things will be done for cash. People, if you need a car, you'll work until you saved up enough money. That's the way a low debt society works.
So does that mean the currency, today we know with the central bank, the currency loses value like every single day. At this point, will the currency maintain its value? Because, if we go back in time to, the early 1900s, you can go into a candy store with a penny and buy a couple pieces of candy. You can't do anything with a penny today. But are we going back to that type of sound money system where your currency, if you're holding $1, that is going to be worth something?
It will be a crypto or blockchain type of currency where there's backing by gold, silver, copper, what have you. Think about it. Back in the early 1900s until 1933, the dollar held its value because it was a direct derivative of gold. You could go into a bank and convert it. And then in 1933, to try to reflate the system, they called gold in and they marked the price up from $20.67 to $35 an ounce. So that was, if you want to call it a monetary stimulus on its own, that was an inflationary push to try to reflate the credit system that had just imploded.
So with this new digital system with sound money, is the way of life going to be better at this point?
I don't know if it's going to be better. It's certainly going to be different. Life is going to go back to basics. You're not going to, You're not going to see people doing a home equity loan on their house and taking $25,000 vacations. I mean, that way of life is done. It's over. Our way of life from 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, that's over. It's done. I mean, people are going to be jumping up and down today because the market's up and the Fed's going to print whatever it takes. We're all saved. No, we're not. We're not all saved. What they just said is they are sacrificing the currency.
So I'm just trying to wrap my head in, and for everyone that's listening, I mean, if we go back to sound money, if we go, even if it's, paper, if it's digital, it doesn't make a difference. If it's backed by.
It is a better world because you're working for something and you get paid in something that as long as that treasury does not overcreate versus gold without inflating the price of that gold, it's a real world where you work for something and you get paid with something that has real backing. Right now, people work basically for nothing, and they put that nothing in the bank, and yeah, it goes around and around, and it spends, but it's circling the drain at this point.
Well, I think a lot of people are living on their funds, but not really living because they need to substitute debt to help them through every single day. I think
they're not earning enough to pay their lifestyle.
Right.
So they go deeper and deeper into debt, and this is the margin call. It's a margin call to the global financial system. You got asset prices dropping. There's your margin call, and at the same time, cash flow has stopped. Literally, all over the world, cash flow has stopped, making the debt that's outstanding unpayable.
So what I just want everyone to understand is that going back to sound, it's not a bad thing. We're heading into. Say that again.
Going back to sound money is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Because I remember.
It's a fair thing.
It's a fair thing.
Right. Yeah. You work, you get paid something real. You're giving real labor, you get paid something real. If you spend your savings that is real for a real good, it's a fair transaction.
Right.
I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a restaurant and spent, $50 or $100 and thought, wow, I got something real for nothing.
Yeah. I understand. So, I mean, as we move forward, the system, once we're on sound money, will just, if there's certain politicians and certain individuals, if we stick with the gold back and we don't inflate, we don't do anything, the way of life, because what you're working for and what you're making, it should be getting better and better and better as we move along.
Yeah, but Dave, I'm 60 years old.
Right.
The better part, I'm going to have probably one foot on a banana peel and the other in the grave. I mean, this is years out. This is not, we'll have the second reset and we'll start moving along like a locomotive, very, very slow. This is 60, 70 years of debt that piled up. 60, 70 years of a completely bogus fake lifestyle that we lived on credit. It's going to take a long, long time. There is no magic tooth fairy that's going to go poof, we have sound money, kumbaya.
Well, look at Weimar Germany. I mean, they went from a system, they restarted it, and it was like the German miracle.
Right, but that took 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, their currency blew up. I mean, totally died in 1923?
Right.
1924? It wasn't until 32 they really started going forward. And by 1939, so that's 15, 18 years, they were back on track and able to start war.
Yeah, well, we don't want war.
No,
yeah,
we don't want war, but understand that is another obvious concern, is that when all these things reset, it's going to be various countries are going to look at various countries and say, hey, you screwed us in this deal, blah, blah, blah. That's how wars start. Wars start over trade. Wars start over currency, currency wars. Wars start over you planted the coronavirus or whatever. Wars start for wars start during bad times, and that's where we're headed, is toward disastrous times, and the risk of war is extremely high. Because you're going to have one country pissed off at another country, pissed off at another country.
And what happens if there was a understanding between all the countries where they're working together to take down the common enemy of the central bank establishment and reset the entire system? If you had something like that, you could minimize war.
If that type of agreement was or is in place, yeah, then you have cool heads sitting at the table,
Right.
or cool heads.
Right. So, I mean, with the first and the second, you don't have exact timetables.
Rather than go around and around, what about after the reset? The bottom line is life is going to become extremely difficult. Our standard of living has already collapsed, and it's not just going to do a V-shaped recovery. Life has changed. What people have in front of them is not what about after the second reset. What they have in front of them is survival. And my advice is, if you have a country home or if you have a plan B to get out of a city or urban environment, do it. I'd do it as fast as you can.
So
I mean, my wife and I we're on plan B. We're moving out to the country. That's our job this week.
So you're just telling people to be prepared, get ready for what is coming.
Yeah, and expect anything.
Okay.
I mean, there's no way to predict what's going to happen.
Bill, thank you very much for being on the X22 Report Spotlight. Once again, how can people see your work?